Welcome to Fintech Insider Focus in association with Visa. Our once insular world of financial services is now a global phenomenon, and there are people everywhere opening up new markets and discovering new challenges like never before. In this strand of Fintech Insider, we're taking a burning question from financial services across the globe and really putting it under the microscope with explainers, expert panels, and in-depth interviews, all to bring the global community into focus. See what we did there? This month, the question we're getting our heads around is, what is stopping super apps from succeeding outside of Asia? Before we can even begin to answer this one, let's maybe take a step back and look at super apps more as a concept. In its plainest terms possible, a super app is a singular smartphone app with several other features and apps within it. The term is said to have been coined way back in 2010 by BlackBerry founder Mike Lazaridis, who described it as a closed ecosystem of many apps that people would use every day because they offered such a seamless, integrated, contextualized, and efficient experience. What this definition is potentially missing is the sheer scale required to be a true super app, with mass adoption being the key to customers feeling comfortable operating with just one provider, because all their friends, their family, employees are all on it, as well as the services that they actually need. The appeal for companies to strive for super app status is pretty obvious when you learn that users are spending an estimated $380 billion worldwide on in-app purchases alone. Why would companies not look to carve out a bigger piece of that pie for themselves? The most successful real-world example of a true super app to date can be found in China, with Tencent's WeChat. Beginning as something of a WhatsApp clone back in 2011, specializing in voice messages, WeChat then branched out into a social network before adding payments, e-commerce, and many more things as well. Now with around 1.1 billion active users, that's right, 1.1 billion, Tencent has licenses to operate mobile payments, insurance, microfinancing, and investing, all within the WeChat Messenger platform. Pretty super indeed, right? The conditions which have made WeChat China's super app superstar may prove difficult, though, to replicate elsewhere, but this has not stopped others trying. Tech companies in every corner of the world are looking at this successful model and thinking, well, if they can do it, why can't we? We'll get into that and much more after a quick message from Visa. Visa's FinTech Fast Track program is streamlining the onboarding process for fintechs, enabling them to gain access to Visa's powerful capabilities and network. Visa and their enablement partners help fintechs launch and scale cards, virtual credentials, and disbursement programs. To learn more, visit partner.visa.com. Welcome back to Fintech Insider Focus. We want to take this conversation about the potential of super apps across the world a little bit wider. So we've put together a panel of experts to really dig into the question, what is stopping super apps from succeeding outside of Asia? Firstly, we have my Fintech Insider Focus co-host for today, Alex McCrea, who is the head of CEMEA. I think I'm getting that right, Alex. I always get that one wrong. But CEMEA for Fintech Partnerships at Visa. How are you doing?
Thank you, David. It's great to be here. Doing well, thank you. And you did get that right. It is CEMEA stands for Central and Eastern Europe, Middle East and Africa. Nice to see you and nice to be with you today.
Very, very good. And this is obviously a topic that's very close to your heart. I mean, tell me a little bit more about why super apps is interesting to you guys at Visa.
Firstly, I think super apps, they all have an interesting story to tell. They all have a different starting point. We see some super apps starting from financial services, some from telco mobile money, some from marketplaces, some from social media, some start out in sharing economy or big tech, right? So from my perspective, each super app has an incredible story to tell, first and foremost. I think there are three things that I find extremely interesting about super apps. The first is really around inclusion and accessibility. Super apps are for everyone. We've seen in our region, so I'm coming from a Central and Eastern Europe, Middle East and Africa perspective, and we've certainly seen in our region that digital inclusion is outpacing financial inclusion. I think we see 60% plus of mobile phone penetration in this region versus about sort of 40% or a little over 40% financial inclusion. So we see super apps as a great way of driving social impact and financial inclusion. I think the second thing is that they're serving consumer needs. Super apps aim to serve pretty much every consumer need that we have, whether you're wanting to split bills with your friends, whether you want to pay utility bills, whether you want to order, car service or food delivery, manage your loyalty points, arrange tickets. They literally are trying to serve every need that you might have. And every time I speak to the guests that you'll hear from in a moment, they're telling me about new capabilities they've just launched or about to launch. So it's pretty exciting. And lastly, and I think where we come in, where myself, my team and the Visa team come in is around payments. Nearly all super apps launch some sort of payment service at some point in their journey or have one from the beginning. And that's what we're really excited about, whether it's credentials, so Visa cards that come with a super app, whether it's something at the back end that we're enabling payments to be made within those third-party apps, whether it's funds transfer capabilities, micro loans, lending. There's an awful lot of sort of payment capability, which we like to think is frictionless and seamless. So those are just some of the things that I think are really interesting to us. It's really around inclusion, serving all consumer needs, and really around payments as a sort of frictionless experience.
Fantastic. And as you say, such a broad-ranging topic, such a great conversation to dig into. And from super apps to super guests, and we have some super guests on the show today. So starting off, we have Waleed Sadek, who is founder and CEO at Paysky. Thank you very much for joining us, Waleed. How's it going today?
A pleasure. We're going very well, very well. Thank you very much, David.
Very, very good. Well, tell the listeners a little bit more about Paysky. What do you guys do? What are you up to?
Right. So basically, I personally have been in that space for over a decade now. I had the pleasure of being on the different side of the equation. Well, I served as the head of innovations and at Visa for some time, and then I moved with Visa to London to manage strategy for CEMEA region as well. So working with 80 plus markets, you get to see a lot of market requirements, market conditions, multiple evolutionary stages. And along these lines, you will see a pattern of evolution happening. And it was definitely that there is a demand for digital offering for financial services, and specifically payment solutions. And based on the current setup, infrastructure, and capabilities of the incumbents, there was a gap in offering these expectations. So that was the idea behind Paysky. So Lisa put together a super team to build Paysky, and that basically is a digital platform to digitize payments on both ends. On one end, we've built a super payment gateway that digitizes acceptance from different payment methods and different payment channels and manage all the process in between. And now we're serving complete markets in Africa and the Middle East using these platforms, white labeling them to banks, telecom operators, and central banks in some cases to operate complete markets. On the other hand, we have another solution for consumers, which is a white-labeled super app platform that comes with a built-in payment engine based on a Visa prepaid card. So think of it like the lightest form of a digital bank account that you can open with the maximum utility you can attain from a rich app like a super app. Think of it again like blending one of the models of the East of Alipay, WeChat Pay, or Paytm with the standardized model of a digital neobank of the West, like Revolut and Monzo, comes a very kind of aggressive proposition and very fruitful, as I will be sharing with you today, what we've done with this proposition in different markets.
Very, very cool. Your investors were nearly panicking a little bit when you said you left the company, but other than that, that all sounds thoroughly interesting. But I thought we had some breaking news right there. But and last but by no means least, we have Madiha Sattar, who is the VP over at Careem Pay. Welcome to the show, Madiha. How's things going? And tell our audience a little bit more about what you guys do.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me on. Excited to be here. So I help lead Careem Pay, which is the fintech arm of Careem. A bit of background on Careem. We are the leading everyday super app of the Middle East, North Africa, and Pakistan region. To Alex's point of different super apps having different stories, we started out as a ride-hailing app. And now we offer mobility more broadly, deliveries, payments, on-demand services, etc. We have about 50 million users and 2 million registered captains who do our rides and deliveries, as well as all of our merchants across our food, payments, and groceries businesses. And we're present in about 10 markets in the region. 2020 was our 10th year, and we recently completed 1 billion rides. So that was a big milestone for us. We're also a platform. So we've added services provided by third-party apps which gives customers more choice and value and helps emerging apps to scale their distribution by leveraging Careem's infrastructure and distribution capabilities. Coming to Careem Pay, which is the business that I help lead, it's our fintech business. We develop fintech products for our consumers, captains, and our merchants. And we also support the payment acceptance needs of the entire Careem platform across all its services and third-party merchants as well. So in the UAE, for example, we are now live with a digital wallet, P2P money transfer product, international money transfer or remittance, bill payments, as well as a one-click checkout product. Also a full suite of fintech products there. And yeah, to Alex's point, our story started with ride hailing before and we sort of went from there. And when it comes to payments, we're fortunate that for a decade, we built all of the infrastructure that supports payment acceptance for the other Careem services. We were accepting cash for rides before our competitors were, as an example. We've built all of that payment processing and acceptance infrastructure, all of the fraud and risk infrastructure that comes with that. And so we were able to really leverage that when we decided to launch fintech products. And so, yes, payments has been core from day one, and we've now leveraged that to launch payments use cases directly.
It's fascinating. I mean, it's such an interesting story and origin, and as you say, almost the company's success has caused problems that actually you've been able to then solve for, which is phenomenal, isn't it, in that way? But we'll unpack that in a little bit more. Before we dive in, I just want to kind of remind all of the listeners, the views and opinions of the panel are their own. They don't necessarily reflect those of their companies that they're representing. And as always, please don't take anything you hear as financial advice. Don't go investing in things. I mean, well, he might just decide to leave the company. You just got to be really careful, announce it on a podcast. So do your own research on these things is really the point that I'm trying to make. So maybe if we jump sort of straight into it, because Madiha, there was lots of great cases for super apps in this construct, and particularly in the, as I'm saying, I mean, friends that I've got at Shopify sounded very similar to the story that you're telling, which is their exponential growth created strains within their own organization, which fintech solutions were able to solve for. So, I mean, is that the biggest plus, do you think, when it comes to either for the integration of fintech capability into a super app from a business perspective, but then I guess also on the flip side of that, how does this all tie together for the consumer?
Yeah, it's a really good question. Sort of, there's an obvious answer, which is customers look for convenience in a super app, right? But it's a little bit more than that. I mean, at least speaking from the MENA-P region, as I mentioned earlier, trust is a big factor, right? So customers don't necessarily trust any regional app or any local app with their personal information, with their payment methods, etc. Once they build trust in a certain brand, and we've been fortunate and blessed to have been able to build that trust with customers over time, we have millions of cards on file, for example, that customers have saved with us across the region, all right? And we're now able to leverage that in our one-click checkout product, where we're bringing that cards on file already so that the merchant that's consuming our one-click checkout product doesn't need that payment information of the customer, and the customer doesn't have to go through the pain of entering all of that information along with their delivery address, their contact information, their card information. All of that is safely and securely stored with Careem. They trust Careem. It's a brand they trust. And so that's a real value add of a super app, right? One other value add in a region such as ours is we don't necessarily have super strong specialist apps in different verticals, right? Homegrown, super strong in different verticals. So if you can meet multiple needs of customers and ensure a certain level of quality across multiple verticals, that becomes super attractive to a user, right? So I think trust is a big part of that. I think quality is a big part of that. Similarly, with fintech, right, when we talk about the traditional players in the region, they're not necessarily offering great digital experiences. And I'm talking about the traditional sort of financial services providers. And so that creates room for a super app to also add fintech experiences. If you're able to deliver a great experience and you're able to build on that trusted brand and those capabilities that enable us to deliver trust through data protection, fraud controls, et cetera, right? And one last thing I'll add in terms of the value for consumers, there's also the cross-cutting value. So for example, Careem Plus is our subscription program. At a low price, you're able to get benefits across multiple services, whether it's rides, deliveries, home services, etc. So that sort of cross-cutting value, whether it's in the form of discounts or better experiences across multiple services, becomes a real value for a consumer coming to a super app.
Yeah, there's a definite ease, and these things work most effectively at scale, as you say. And that, I mean, Alex, what do you think for the case for super apps in this way? What do you really see as the major business or customer real benefit?
I'll probably underscore what Madiha just shared, actually. So it's really around convenience. We see that the super apps, certainly that exist in this region, offer a one-stop shop, right? So you can pretty much get everything in one place. You don't have to shop around. It saves time and money. I think it's really around convenience. And then it's about customer experience. David, I don't know if you've got a lot of experience here, but some of the best experiences I've had have actually been sort of using super apps. It's pretty frictionless, ability to make payments, ability to get sort of offers, so on and so forth. It's just great customer experience. I think they're the main cases in my mind for super apps. I don't know if Waleed, if you've got a different view or anything else you would add to that.
Well, for us, actually, the super app concept came as a natural extension of how we started as a financial services app. So we started as a payment application that comes with a prepaid card that basically worked on the financial inclusion dimension. Egypt, where we started, is heavily unbanked. It's 70% of the population is unbanked. So by availing a very simple digital financial service account that they can order from an app, open from an app, and order the card delivered the next day, was something that was unheard of. And the traction, the momentum around this made us think that people would need the card to eventually do payments. And when they do payments, they would want to go to different websites, different apps. And if we could kind of collate these services within one single application, we will kind of encourage the customers to use these channels for possibly cross-selling these propositions. And moreover, we started to create synergies between the different use cases. For example, you're checking out from our Yalla travel use case. We can propose and cross-sell to you a Yalla travel insurance policy. You are browsing our Yalla Mall use case. We call it mini app. We are browsing the Yalla Mall mini app, and you like a phone, but you cannot afford it now. You can start a saving box in the Yalla Money use case or mini app, so that you can start we call it save now, buy later. When you reach the target price for that phone, we'll order that phone from our mall and deliver that to you. So started to create inter-ecosystem, if you will, synergies that our customers loved. And that's why in a very, very short time from launching the Yalla super app and Yalla card in partnership with Visa in Egypt, we have onboarded over 1 million customers in less than 8 months, which is a kind of a groundbreaking achievement in the Egyptian market by all measures, given that the whole market has less than 30 million cards in decades of service. So I believe the interconnectivity and the synergies that we can create from within the super app ecosystem is something that is beyond convenience. It's kind of reading the customer's mind and proposing services that are based on their preference and the previous encounters with us, and that's based around the data. Notice the old proverb that the banks knows more about you than your wife. I think we know more about you than your wife and the bank. So at least our algorithms does. So by seeing how you browse and the data, the items you put in your favorites, and where you place your orders, and not just from a purchasing perspective like you would do on an e-commerce marketplace, but we'll also see when you travel and your preferences for travel and how you get paid and how you pay out. So all of these data coming together will build a more comprehensive idea about our customers, enabling us to serve them better.
So I want to kind of avoid this just being a love-in, because like this is like a big pro. You're like, we're all super pro super apps here, right? But what's the case against this then? Because obviously, Madiha, you're going to tell me there is no case against this. I can already hear it in that sense, and that's understandable. But there's got to be sort of negatives here. I mean, one that I would offer is, big banks struggle with information architecture just in the financial services construct in order to surface all of the complexities of an individual's financial life. And really what we're talking about, super apps are pretty badly named in my view. They're not really apps, they're operating systems. They are much broader construct than just, hey, we've got 4 things in our navigational structure and which one of these things do you want to engage with? So, Madiha, how do you traverse that complexity? Because, on one hand, if you're ride hailing or You've got all of the integrations around financial services. You've got all of the broader construct of all of the different other industries that you impact. I mean, there's some UX people with a pretty, strong headache, I imagine, right?
Absolutely. You've hit the nail on the head. The question is, how do you provide or surface the right services to the right user at the right time? Right. And that's really absolutely, it's not just a UX topic. It's also a data problem. It's also a marketing problem. Right. So yes, there's a lot of time and thinking being spent on how do we figure out what each of these customers want. The benefit of having a super app is that you do have great insight into customer preferences across multiple services. Right. The question is, how best can you utilize that? And then how do you make it relevant to the customer such that they're not seeing 17 things they're not interested in? Right. So absolutely, that's a challenge. But let me add a couple of other interesting ones as well. One is, how do you have your brand reflect the super app brand, right? So as a business owner or product owner trying to launch Careem Pay, Careem is still primarily, for many users, still associated with ride hailing. And of course, we work very hard to sort of develop that brand perception where food is a big part of what we do. Grocery delivery is a big part of what we do. Payments now is a big part of what we do. But it requires a lot more education for Careem Pay than it would for a fintech app that has always been a fintech app, right? So that's another piece I would point out. And then lastly, I would say, we have to make sure that every experience we're delivering is a great experience. I mentioned this earlier. We don't have super strong specialist apps in every vertical in this region, which creates an opportunity for a super app. But we also then want to make sure that we're delivering a really great experience across services that are very, very different, from the logistics of sort of operating our dark stores to sort of the fraud controls and super simple user experience we want in fintech, right? So it's having to get good at multiple things, or being able to bring the best in class on board in terms of integrating third-party apps, and then applying the right governance on those third-party apps to make sure they're meeting our quality bar. So those are just some of the none of these are reasons not to be in the super app game, but these are sort of things that we need to achieve and challenges we need to overcome.
Yeah. I mean, anything you'd like to add to that, Alex? Because, I mean, it's an interesting point, isn't it? And actually, if we look at multiple data points and we stand back from what Madiha is saying, but also the other examples of super apps around the world, most of them don't start in financial services. I mean, financial services is getting super excited about it, but actually, are we starting at the wrong place? You say with Madiha, Careem has got a great brand that it can pivot into these things because of everything that's there. But I mean, Alex, what do you think? Is this a we're getting excited, but maybe we're starting at the wrong place?
It's a really good question, because I don't think there's a right or wrong answer to that, David. As I said earlier, super apps start from very different points and offer different capabilities and services, throughout their journey. There are some limitations. We are super pro about super apps, but there are definitely some limitations. Building on Adi's last point around engaging the brand, that she was just explaining, Careem is commonly associated with ride hailing. But now if you look at the Careem super app, ride hailing is one of the last things to see on that sort of app, and you can literally do everything in one place. Some of the challenges I see are not too dissimilar from digital banks, right? So one of them is you want to engage with the brand physically sometimes, right? So, with a super app, with a digital bank, you can't walk in. There is no branch. There's no, that's not a bad thing, as we know, David, but there's sometimes you, as a customer, you do want to engage physically with that brand. I think Madiha, Waleed have got some great examples. I'll let them talk to that, but some ways that Careem and Paysky Yalla have done some activations, engaged with the brand in countries differently. It's really interesting. I think other challenges around sort of getting the customer experience right, as Madiha just also saying, it's difficult knowing what customers need at the right time and continually refining, and improving on your customer experience. Loans, Waleed and I were talking recently, we're not able to deliver the services we'd like at the right time always. Sometimes super apps rely heavily on partnerships. It's not always possible for a super app to get regulatory approval to do lending or provide insurance in-house or provide remittance in-house. So those partnerships are key, but they do take time to deliver. So sometimes it's around limitations of what the super app provider can do and dependencies on key partners. And one other issue that's associated with all digital service providers is data privacy and data sharing. And this goes back to the trust point. because these are lovable brands. You interact with them on a daily basis. You naturally trust this brand, and as long as consumers are aware of how data is stored and managed, then you're very happy in most cases to continue using an extension of those sort of core services. So hopefully that answers the question, David, there in terms of some of those challenges and starting at the right and wrong point and some of the issues we find ourselves up against.
Yeah, I mean, it is a fascinating challenge, isn't it? Because actually, I wonder, and just through this conversation, how much overlapping circles between the narratives around embedded finance and super apps are so intertwined. Because actually, a lot of what we're talking about here is actually, and again, Madiha, your points around actually, look, taking down a finance route makes total sense from a value chain perspective for your organization, and actually being brilliant about something that actually is a great additional revenue opportunity within your organization makes so much sense in that way. But first of all, you've got to build the trust. First of all, you've got to build the brand. First of all, you've got to build the loyalty. And once you have that, then actually this is one step on many steps, I'm sure, that actually through success breeds the opportunity to pursue. So it really is a fascinating one in that sense. I go really back to my point that I don't think any super app starts as a super app, and it's very unlikely they start with the intention to be one. I think you start by solving a problem for a consumer, and that success really allows you to solve the next problem, doesn't it, in that way? But Waleed, what do you think? Is this a series of building more and more capabilities, solving more customer problems? Often when you solve a problem, you create 3 others that you can solve as well. But is this an industry that's almost being able to address these problems because digital has really sort of got to a different place? We at 11FS, we talk about digital riches. This isn't about digitized banking. It's about real-time, intelligent, contextual, human, extendable, and social. A lot of the stuff that we're talking about here is about really contextualizing to the surface and solving real problems in that way.
Yes, I totally agree. And I think that is why super apps are surfacing now and becoming a very prominent choice for customers in multiple markets. And when you look at the emergence of super apps coming from the East, it's primarily from markets that are heavily populated, massively underserved, and becoming very quickly digital. So basically, as they say, you start late, but you start with the latest. And that's exactly what's happening. They are riding on this wave of digital transformation to reach customers in limits that traditional incumbents with brick and mortar models are very, very hard to reach, as well as will have very high cost to serve if they would want to reach. So that is why it's now happening in this kind of evolutionary curve of digital and technology evolution. One major aspect on super apps, and as well as the ability to cross monetize from the different use cases. So if you would just open a digital bank in a developing or emerging economy, you would suffer for a few years of negative performance in terms of revenues and profitability, because they're only serving a very specialized niche that might have its own challenges and price pressure, which other incumbents and competitions will put on you. But having different monetization streams within this super app ecosystem can enhance the unit economics of that performance per customer and per transaction. And then at the end, you can have a more healthy business that can grow using the other revenue streams that you can generate, which makes perfect sense for the region that we're in.
That makes a lot of sense. And is this what really creates that? Again, scale is so important in any organization in driving efficiency across these things. So, is that really what attracts so many companies to this? Because the market is so significant once you've got that momentum. Madiha, maybe pointing that one to you, is you guys are driving down that road particularly, but without, as you say, the strong competition in the region for all of those different slices of opportunities that lay ahead of you, then, solving as many of those problems as you can, that market is massive, isn't it?
Yeah, I think even before we get to the opportunity, it's also about Careem's purpose, right? And our purpose, if you read it, is to simplify life in the region. you cannot simplify life without simplifying payments, right? So we simplified mobility, we're trying to simplify deliveries, and then we were like, well, payments is such a core part of people's lives that that's a natural extension in terms of the purpose of our of what we've set out to do, right? Life in our region can be needlessly complex, and we think we can simplify it through great product and tech experiences. So that sort of helps us bring our mission together. But then more from a sustainability point of view, definitely there's a customer acquisition cost that it lowers, right? If we were to launch a rides app and a food app and a fintech app, really the cost of acquiring customers to all of these different apps and brands would be unsustainable, right? So there's a clear play in terms of customer acquisition cost. The other point is, because we have such a comprehensive view of customer preferences across multiple different use cases, we're also able to understand that customer better and then surface the most relevant service to that customer, which then increases the conversion rate of that customer, right? So I think that also is another important point. And then one other consideration that is very specific to this region is that the TAM, or the total addressable market, of each of these individual services may not be large enough in dollar terms to support a large, sort of very, very scaled tech player, right? And in order for us to achieve that scale, we do have to address multiple customer pain points across multiple verticals and needs. So that's where we see the real value of scale, simplifying lives across all of the daily needs of a customer, right? And then, of course, we can share those savings back with customers, right? And again, referencing our Careem Plus subscription program, the users that are on a subscription program, use 3 to 4, their monthly transactions are 3 to 4 times higher. They're 30% more likely to be retained on the platform, et cetera. So that scale that enables us then to also share those that value back with the customer or our captains or our merchants.
Okay. I mean, it's fascinating, as you say, that point around addressable market is really interesting. Often necessity sort of really is the mother of innovation in that sense, and building out those revenue models to support in that region is fascinating. I mean, that we've definitely seen that in other regions as well. You'd sort of point to the Singaporean market in a very similar way, in Hong Kong potentially as well. You've not huge populations, but actually the different opportunities to broaden the capability, particularly off the back of a brand that people have got a great level of affinity with. I mean, Alex, this goes back again for me, and I feel like I'm throwing the hospital passes to you repeatedly on this one, but going back to, there's a lot of people who listen to the show who are sitting in banks. I mean, is this an opportunity, or is this a threat to them? Because I think it's an interesting thing that most, you spoke to most banks across the world, they will have some view of whether they have a strategy and whether that's an offensive one, that this is an opportunity for them, or whether it's a defensive one in terms of, look, we see this happening in markets and we're going to have to do something about it. Because really at this stage, even if they took a defensive strategy and allowed themselves to be integrated into these things, I mean, it's a very different world if you're not really owning and developing and being part of that customer engagement. So super apps, are they a threat or an opportunity, do you think?
They're not hospital passes. but if we get time, I'd love to ask a few questions of my own back at you. I don't think they're a threat. I think they're an opportunity. I think those opportunities are not always understood or not always clear. And I think some traditional financial institutions are still figuring out that, what the collaboration model looks like. Visa, noting the disclaimer earlier, just, our mission is to sort of uplift everyone everywhere. And central to that mission is to drive social impact, drive inclusion, expand access. And I think when you think of traditional banks, David, they are focusing on traditional clients for the most part, right? These are banked customers, sort of known quantities. And I think one of the things that excites me personally, but also, Visa, and I'm sure many of our listeners, is the fact that it is a chance to reach very new audiences, underbanked and underserved customers, and provide them with something that they wouldn't get from traditional partners. I think that's an opportunity for traditional financial institutions as well, ability to also reach those new audiences, to extend microloans or microservices or funds transfer capabilities or insurance or other lending products, those sorts of things to, by working with Waleed and Madiha's respective organizations to reach those new audiences. That's what's really cool and really exciting. ability to co-develop. I think, from a bank's perspective, you made reference to this earlier, they don't always have the most advanced systems. I'm being kind here. So partnering with, Careem or a Paysky, you've got a chance to co-develop, create and release something with a speed that I think few people can match. I think so that opportunity, if you're wanting to test a capability, reach new audiences, or launch in a new market, I think it's just one of the incredible opportunity for a financial institution. And lastly, sort of partnerships are key. I think banks need to figure out, what they want to get, and sort of super apps, I think, open to these discussions and partnerships. Visa's played a central role in introducing banks and traditional financial institutions with non-traditional financial institutions. That's a big focus for us. It's not just serving the needs of both partners, but it's that, helping to forge those relationships, because then you get synergies that are just really exciting and benefit everyone. I think that answers the question. For me, it's very much an opportunity, but it still needs to be sort of understood and explored more.
Yeah, fascinating. I mean, as you say, opportunities or threats are often in the eyes of the beholder, aren't they? In that sense, and I think that is a very interesting point. And I think in all of this, I think the beautiful thing is often, and we've worked in an industry for a long period of time that maybe didn't have the competitive edges to people coming in who fully and totally understand technology, as you say. There's I imagine there's no single view of customer strategy transformation program happening in either of your companies. So being able to really use these things and make these things happen is a critical part of actually technologically enabling an industry in that way. I do keep coming back to the point, though, how critical is financial services? Because really, the beautiful thing seems to be with super apps is not really the financial services bit. It's surfacing the problem, and financial services just happens to be the solution to that in that sense, whether it's payments or lending or anything. The end, the last yard in that sense might be something to do with FS, but so often it's just the great user experience, great usage of data, surfacing those things. I guess one thing to maybe look at, and we really heavily caveated this question at the beginning of what is stopping super apps from succeeding outside of Asia. Now, Madiha, you're obviously going to say they are succeeding outside of Asia. Dubai is obviously a very good, fruitful ground for this type of change happening as well. But maybe we should sort of point to, just because it works in one place doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work in another region. And I think, Safaricom and everything with M-Pesa is always pointed to as a good, bad example in that sense. Worked amazingly well, fundamental fabric changer for financial services in a particular part of Africa. And, copy and paste that to another region, and that doesn't work so well. And I mean, arguably, we would say the same thing with very large, international banks. You take one functionality that works amazingly well in Hong Kong for HSBC and put it in the UK, and maybe people don't care because of the different mechanisms. So do you think there is a huge amount of sort of cultural nuances in these different regions that are going to make this work or not? And what do you think they might be? I mean, Waleed, it's a very long question, possibly several questions there, but do you think the regional focus of where these things have been successful is actually a big part of their success in the first place?
I think there was, a digital transformation curve and evolutionary process that was happening in these markets, and a necessity by the population and by the inhabitants to have access to better services. And let's not also forget a very willful and diligent approach from the government and regulators to make this happen as well, by mandating a lot of activities to happen electronically in many of these markets, demonetization and canceling some of the currency notes up to that extent. In India, for example, at some point of time, pushed a lot of the population to go and put their funds in electronic form for not to lose them. So all the factors coming together, working together, leading to the transformation to happen, led to that kind of transformation. But I believe that this can also be replicated in other markets, specifically developing countries and developing economies suffering the same side effects of the previous underserving of population by financial services. I would namely name the Middle East and Africa. We've had a brilliant experience that I would like to share with in launching our card and money app initially that became then a super app, which is the Yalla super app and card now, Visa card. So basically, we started by partnering with a leading financial institution, and then hence touching back on your question, is it a threat or opportunity? Some of the financial institutions thought that this is too complex to operate, too complex to be part of, and potentially disruptive to their own models. So they kept on kind of stalling in making decisions. Till we landed another financial institution that was very open-minded and forward-looking, that thought this will bring me customers, will bring me transactions, will allow me to cross-sell more products. And if I can work closely with this partner, I might not have a risk of changing that supplier. And basically, we worked very closely. And of course, Visa was also played a pivotal part in this. And after reaching this agreement, we had a beautiful formula of collaboration. They provide the infrastructure, they provide the licensing, they provide part of the technology as well when it comes to the core components. And then we provide all the innovation layer, if you will. We provide the digital layer, the customer experience interfaces, all the new ideas, all the new partnerships that we bring to this equation. So I think we have done what, based on the numbers and based on previous market records, this was a major achievement in the Egyptian market to kind of bank 1 million customers in less than 8 months and processing millions of transactions and billions of Egyptian pounds in such a short duration with double-digit growth month on month, not quarterly. So this story is scalable. We're scaling this now to UAE and from there to more populous markets like Pakistan, which we'll be launching later on this quarter.
Fascinating. When you get it right, people use it at scale, right? And I think that's the thing that we've sort of seen maybe globally as well is, success scales really effectively digitally. And I guess back to that point around the physical nature of, traditional financial services or traditional problem solving, it didn't quite scale as effectively as this would be, definitely not cost effectively or from a virality perspective. So, I mean, look, there's a huge amounts of pros, there's huge amounts of opportunities, there's still huge amounts of problems to solve and slices of opportunity across all different types of industries that, again, for me, success breeds the ability to sort of tackle into. So, I think we're probably concluding on this one that actually there is real success happening outside of Asia with super apps, and really probably we're only just starting to scratch the surface in terms of what's beyond super apps. I'm looking for another superlative in terms of description of them in that sense. But for me, I think again it goes, Alex, to your point. This is a transitionary period, and for me, we get to operating systems, not just apps in that sense, in terms of where they can be. But on that note, I think we're probably running out of time at this stage. We'll definitely have to have you all guys back to discuss this subject a little bit further in a little bit more detail, because it's going to keep changing, it's going to keep evolving. But sadly, that does wrap up this edition of Fintech Insider Focus in association with Visa. Thank you so much to our panel for joining us. Where can people learn a little bit more about you and your companies? Waleed, starting with you.
Right. So our solutions, our propositions could be reached on our website, paysky.io. I personally can be reached over LinkedIn. That would be the best way to reach me and have it for discussion forward. Thank you.
Very good. Madiha, where can people learn about you and all the great stuff you're up to in Dubai?
They can look me up on LinkedIn. My personal LinkedIn is Madiha Sattar. That's Sattar. Or you can look up Careem.com, which is our company page, which has some dedicated information on Careem Pay as well, and all of the fintech use cases that we are providing.
Fantastic. And Alex, where can people learn a little bit more about what you're up to?
So please check out the Visa standard website. I think there's a section of that website which detail our partner programs, in particular some of the fintech relevant programs. So take a look at Visa's website and please look me up, give me a message. I'm Alex McCrea. I'm on LinkedIn. Just type in Alex space MCCR and it should come up.
Very, very good. As for me, you can find me always lurking on LinkedIn these days. Thank you so much for listening. If you like what you heard, subscribe to our podcast and don't forget to leave us a review. It helps us make it better and helps other people find the show as well. For more information and more information on this discussion, look out for the next episode of Fintech Insider Focus in 2 weeks' time. Thank you very much for listening, everybody. Goodbye.